Hi, this is Ron with 1911 Ultra Tool. Purpose of this video is to help you and get a better understanding of the different recoil systems that are typically used in 1911s. There's a lot of variants in each and every one of them, and I will go into detail on each and every one of them in a separate video. This one's just to help you identify as much as possible exactly what kind of recoil system is in your 1911, so that you're pushed in the right direction of picking one of our solutions. First off, there are two types of 1911s. First type is bushing barrel. And a bushing barrel is just that. It has a separate bushing for the lockup of the barrel. And it comes apart completely different than a bushingless barrel. Bushingless barrel is just that. It doesn't have a bushing. The lockup is provided by machining the slide for the lockup of the barrel. So for this type of firearm, there's all kinds of different guide rod solutions. Everything from the short guide rod, I can tell because this is a closed plug, which means it has a short guide rod like this, similar to this, and collects the spring as the recoil comes back. This one, though, has a tendency to snake, but this is the original solution for the 1911, has worked all these years. Manufacturers, though, have gone to what they call full-length guide rod. A full-length guide rod is basically a guide rod that the spring is collected the full length of the guide rod. So as it recoils, it's going to collect keep the spring from snaking and collect it. Okay, let's look at another one here. Okay, this one's a full-length guide rod, but it's a two-piece guide rod, and the reason I know that is because it has the front half has to be removed in order to disassemble this firearm. You can't turn the bushing until you've removed the front half of the guide rod. It won't allow enough clearance for the spring plug to be pressed down, and the bushing will just hit the guide rod. So it has to be removed. But this is a full-length guide rod. It's just two pieces. Whereas like in this Colt Commander, this is a full-length guide rod, but notice it's a little bit short. It's sticking a little bit under, and that's to provide clearance for the bushing to turn so that it can be removed or disassembled. So it's a full-length guide rod, open plug, and that's so that when it fires or recoils, you see the guide rod comes out with the barrel. So that type of firearm requires these type of solutions. Bushing wrenches, which you can get anywhere from steel to plastic to palm wrenches like this, or our professional duty bushing wrench. Like I said, all this could be covered in a separate video. Now back to bushingless 1911s. Okay, starting out with the most commonly found in the compacts or semi-compact 1911s. And as they got the barrel shorter and shorter, they had to go with a different solution. And the reason why is this, forever, it's been round spring. And the problem is that with any spring, if I can find one, is once it reaches its full collapse, it becomes solid. So having enough coils and enough strength to absorb the recoil before it collapses completely down is the goal of every manufacturer. As they began to shorten barrels all the way down to like 3 inches, they had to come up with a different solution. And that's the dual spring recoil system. And basically what it is it's actually just that. It's an inner spring on a smaller guide rod, an inner spring plug, and an outer spring. And when recoil happens, it comes back. You notice the two of them work together, and that provided the needed absorption of the recoil with a shorter length. but this is still considered a full-length guide rod. And the reason why is the springs collect the full length of the guide rod. So they range anywhere from 3 inches all the way up to something like this. This is, of course, really not a 1911. It's a 2011 SDI, but it's the same principle. And you'll notice that it has a dual spring recoil system. And the reason you always know a dual spring, it will have a front spring retainer, small guide rod, inner spring plug. This is the EMP, Springfield EMP, and you'll notice front spring retainer, small guide rod, inner spring plug. So that's a dual spring recoil system. That takes one type of solution to capture the spring pressure. And the deal is that with the bushing barrel, the plug comes out the front. It comes out this way. With a bushingless, it comes out the rear. And I'll show that real quick if I can find a tool. I think that'll work. Okay. When it's disassembled, the front spring plug the spring assembly comes out the rear. And the way manufacturers have dealt with that, now because it's a full-length guide rod, the clearances have to be there in order to give it the ability to come up and out. If I take this spring off, or if I take the tool off of there, you'll notice, well, and I got that hung. Let me get this up. Okay, you can't get the guide rod out. So the way manufacturers have dealt with that is they put a hole in the guide rod for a wire tool or paper clip or something to capture it at a point at least, so that it provides the clearance needed to pull the guide rod and spring assembly out. Let's see if I can get this back together real quick. In fact, I'm going to do something here. I'm going to have to do this the awkward way. Put this tool back on. Now, that's typically 3-inch, but there are now the other type of guide rod assembly that more and more manufacturers are going to, and that's the round wire. This is an EGW flat wire spring assembly, 45 caliber recoil, and it's designed to go in 3-inch like the Kimber Ultra or the Colt Defender and New Agent, or actually New Agent's 9mm, but in a 45 Defender to replace the factory dual spring recoil system. And the difference between a flat wire and round wire is it's a crossbreed kind of the single spring round wire, with the exception that the wire is flat coils. Let me see if I can get this back together real quick. Okay. And you'll notice there's no spring retainer. You will also notice the diameter. Okay. With a round wire, it takes up more space, diameter-wise. And all these springs, round wire, flat wire, are designed to go inside a spring plug. The actual outside diameter of the wire is not different. What's different is with a flat wire, where the coils are flat instead of round, the inside diameter gets smaller. And that's so that these can be used in a standard plug, a standard size. So there's no modification to the 1911. The difference is the hole size. If you'll notice here, this is flat wire, small hole, see the wider flange, and round wire. And because of those guide rod diameters and the fact that it's a single spring, and there is nowhere to put, see if I can get that off, or I'll do it. There's nowhere to put a tool. Basically, they provide that hole. This is a Kimber Pro guide rod, and it's got a hole provided for a wire so that you can disassemble the firearm, provide the clearance needed to get it up out of the system, out of the slide. But there's nowhere to attach a tool such as this one, or in other words, you aren't getting that tool on there. Besides the diameter, there's nowhere to hold it. So the other solution that we came up with was this, and that's simply a friction-based tool. As long as it's got pressure against that, and I just messed up because this is not a Kimber guide rod. Anyway, is this. Strictly friction-based. So we have the same kind of solution for the flat wire full-length guide rods. Let's take a look. This is, where'd it go? Here it is. Okay, this is the Kimber 9mm Tactical. And if you'll notice, it has a large guide rod, the small flange around it for the hole. And we make this is what we call a custom tool. Custom tools are designed to at least come real close to, if not perfectly, line up the takedown notch. And as you can see, the takedown notch is here. Whereas with the factory, the hole is actually back here and would actually stop somewhere about in there. Now, that's not a problem because you can just move the slide forward. Okay, but what if you've got a Pro that's had the Wilson Combat 651 flat wire spring assembly put in it? Notice the diameter of the guide rod is a whole lot smaller, and even though they put a little point up front for guiding it through the hole when it fires, it's not really a full length. Well, I guess you could still call it full length, but it's got a little bit of space up here where it's not taking up the spring, but you notice it doesn't fill the hole, so it doesn't come all the way up. Same deal here, 4-inch. This 4-inch SDI Ranger, front spring retainer, small guide rod, inner spring plug, so it's a dual spring recoil assembly. Dan Wesson. Okay, we've got a small diameter guide rod. So we're probably using a flat wire spring. So the solution, of course, has always been, and this was my uncle's original solution on a round wire full-length guide rod for the Kimber Pro. And that's basically the modified guide rod to hold a tool. Whereas that now, in order for this tool to work, you buy one tool, but every Pro that you would put it on would have to have a modified guide rod to hold it. Whereas the current solution doesn't care. In fact, it could even go on the one that's modified and it wouldn't make any difference. So that same solution carried over to the flat wire. And that is one, though, that fits the diameter of the flat wire and allows it to lock up. And this is our Universal Pro Tool. This tool is not going to work on a round wire guide rod assembly. And vice versa. The round wire guide or tool is not going to work on a flat wire guide rod. Now, I'm going to cover in detail each and every one of these guide rod systems, but obviously, if you ordered this tool for this type of guide rod, it's not going to work. It's not going to hold anything. And obviously, if you ordered this one, even though it's a Universal Pro Tool, it's for flat wire, and you ordered it for a full-size guide rod, it's not going to, or standard round wire guide rod, it's not going to fit. Hole's not big enough, it's not large enough to take it. And in the same respect, if you ordered one for a dual spring, it's not going to work on a single spring guide rod. Well, that's it in a nutshell. That's kind of what I wanted to cover from that standpoint. You will find, though, that This is not really a 1911. This is I think this one's the 380. No, 9mm. This is the Kimber 9, Micro 9. Looks a lot like a 1911. Has a small diameter guide rod. Way too small, actually, for this. You aren't going to hold it there. But a tool's worthless for this because it doesn't have an outer spring plug. So making a tool for this firearm is not even possible because there's no way. Even though the guide rod still comes out the rear, there's no spring plug to carry the tool with it. And the same thing on the Micro. And they actually, of course, this discontinued, but on their Solo, which wasn't a 1911 either, they actually used a dual spring recoil system. So even when you're looking at other handguns, look at the type of recoil system that it has. But same deal. There's no outer spring plug, so there's no way to put a tool on there and have it come out with it. So I hope at the very least, that's kind of educational. Give you an idea of the gamut of solutions that are out there. But also, like I said, each and every one of these, look for the video for if you've got if you've got a dual spring recoil system, look for that video. If you've got a round wire, full length guide rod, look for that video. If you've got a flat wire, full length guide rod, and of course, all this is assuming these are bull barrel or bushingless barrel. Look for the video for the flat wire, bushingless barrel. If you've got a bushing barrel, look for our bushing barrel video. But that's it, and I hope that clears some things up, and hopefully it prevents some returns for me when people inadvertently order the wrong tool and we have to do an exchange or do a workaround. Thanks for watching.